Like Alison, I think, social license to operate is such a relevant industry topic for us, and I hope we had the chance to express our concerns and interests as part of the Q&A. I'm going to hand over to Philippa Woodhill as our last presenter today, from the Australian Rural Leadership Programme as the Rural Partner Relations Manager, 10 to 15 minutes to talk about unity in industry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I guess I need to preface my time with the fact that I know very little about the fishing industry. I've certainly been privileged enough to work with a number of the leaders in the industry. But for the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation, we're looking broadly at rural and regional communities, and obviously fisheries plays a huge part in that. But I guess for me and the role that I play, I've been at the foundation for over 10 years. It was never part of my intent to be in an organisation that long, but I still believe that I'm learning and I'm contributing, and had the fortunate opportunity to work with a number of different CEOs, which have meant that my time in the job has been very different through those experiences. The Australian Rural Leadership Foundation has existed for 25 years next year, and Fisheries Research and Development Corporation has been a long-term supporter of the work that we do. And I would have to say that as an industry, it is one of the few that for 25 years has acknowledged the role that people play in the industry and its success. And whilst it mightn't feel like it at times, their investment in the capability of leaders in the sector is second to none when you look at the investment made by other industries. So thank you for inviting us here today. It's a no-brainer to be talking about leadership in an industry and creating opportunities, and I guess being proactive, because so often, as both Martin and Alison have mentioned, it's the issues that then start to drive and where we see leaders pop up, but to actually create strategies where people can be establishing collaborations and relationships so that when the shit does hit the fan, people have got resources and relationships to call on. So the foundation runs a flagship program, and I guess it does three things. I mean, it does a million things, but it does three things for people, and one is the gift of time, because so often as leaders we get caught up in the busyness of day-to-day work, and even in the conversation I've had since I entered the room with a participant, it's that gift of taking time and space out of your daily life to actually think about what the big picture is and what am I actually committed to, rather than protecting turf and having to survive. And it speaks to Martin's big picture about what I'm good at, where I can see success. Anyway, the hedgehog model, I know it, but... and so I guess for the foundation, we strongly believe in investing in diversity. And we don't believe that positional leadership is the only place where people can have influence and make change. And I guess for me that speaks to then a little bit about who I am. And I know when I asked who else was on the panel, and oh my goodness, you know, and Jill had asked me specifically to be on the panel, and who am I and what have I achieved? And I would actually say that I don't sit in a position of, I don't sit in a leadership position, but influence is an incredible space to operate from, and I strongly believe that through influence I've been able to affect a huge number of leaders. And I would say in Jill's role she would say the same thing. People say, what are your achievements? Well, I know 1,000 really amazing people doing amazing things, and I've contributed in some way to how they can do their role better. And that's how the foundation sees itself as well. We ultimately, I guess, exist because we believe in a leader's ongoing commitment to learning. So you don't finish this program as a leader. You're actually making a start in taking on more and more opportunities to influence and guide the industry that you belong to. And we believe that diversity, being courageous, ethical and influential for the greater good of rural, regional and remote Australia is really important. And I think when you talk about being united and being one, like my fellow panellists, I would believe strongly that it's not about being one voice. I think you can be many voices and still be united if you actually give yourself time and a length of vision. So maybe in the actual moment you're not going to be able to find the common ground, but if you actually look towards what's my 10, and for some particular moments and some relationships it might even need to be bigger than that, and Austral's success in some of the relationships that they've been able to work through is about looking at what's the big picture and where is our common ground. Now, doing their day-to-day business, you would look at them and go, there is no common ground. And that's obviously when many organisations take a really firm stand and all of a sudden heels are dug in, you say things you shouldn't, there's emotion involved, and it's really hard to come back from that. So how do you create time and space for relationships and being able to look forward long enough to say, actually, what we want is the same thing. We want our grandchildren to be using these oceans and having fun and engaging with and eating, all those things. That's what we want together. So how can we actually look to that part of our goal, and then how can we both exist, having different voices in the same space? I would say that, so our flagship program, 35 individuals come together over a 15-month period. You read their bios straight up, you even interview them, you go, whoa, that person's not going to like that person. You can make a whole range of quick little assessments in your head about where some of the clashes are going to be and where some great conversations are going to be if they're facilitated and they're prepared to go there. And I can tell you that if you give time and space to the relationships, whether they're in fisheries, environment, in grains, in water, in arts and culture and the role that it plays in the communities that you live in, then there will always be amazing respect developed for what they're trying to achieve. And I don't think people ultimately want anything different other than to live in thriving communities where children can be happy and where we can both succeed. So I think it's really important then for the fishing industry and all industries to look outside what's happening in the fishing industry, because there are great examples of collaboration occurring, even as far as, so not even going from fisheries to live export or to grains, but even looking at the banking sector and how it can unify. So the big four banks, they're competitors, they're fiercely competitive. In fact, it can be quite feral. But when they come to talk to government, the four of them sit down in the room and they've strategised and they've got a clear picture of how they're going to communicate. Now, they have very different voices and exist then on a sporting field that's fiercely competitive. And I would say the same even for an organisation like the AMA, the Australian Medical Association, how they're able to galvanise their members to then speak to government in regards to some of the Medicare reforms. So I would always say it's really important to be on the dance floor and to be an active member on the dance floor. But what's even more important is to take a step back and go to the balcony and look down at the dance floor and see who the players are and who do I need to speak with and who's not on the dance floor. So one of my questions as I looked around the room and thought, I should meet that person, that person, that person. I wonder what industries they're from and who's doing what and who's involved in what issues are actually occurring in your industry. The other question that always comes up for me is who's not in the room. Whose voice is not here at the table when we meet. And I think what a good leader can do is, whilst they can't speak on behalf of somebody else, they can actually ensure that those voices are heard and create good process. So I'm people process driven, sometimes at the expense of an output or an outcome. But I also think that if I get the people and the process part right, then other people will be able to be responsible for and work towards that outcome and the outputs. So one of the biggest criticisms I know that I receive is that I spend too long talking, I think about the opportunity cost in the relationship, and sometimes that can really slow me down in actually achieving what I'm working towards. And so I have great people around me that help me do that and are more action orientated in that respect. But I know that the work that I've been able to do is around the influence piece. So you don't need to leave this room and go and, FRDC mightn't like this, but you don't have to be on a committee. Whilst that's really important and succession planning for industries is crucial, you can have incredible influence in your community or in your business and more broadly in the sector by having those relationships and taking time and space out and encouraging other people to take that time and space out. So, sorry, I just want to make sure I do stick to... The other thing is a quote somebody used in the office, and then I googled where it came from, and it's been around since the 1800s, is that we can all accomplish great things if we're not willing to take the credit for it. And so that is about having the long-term vision and working towards something much bigger than you, and you can continue to exist as the one if the long-term picture is enough and you're willing to actually say, well, I don't need to have my badge on that because I know that if I put this process in place over time, other people will pick up, and if the process is good, it will sustain itself. And I guess in regards to the Emperor and his clothes, I had to reread the fable myself so I could fully appreciate what Jill was asking. You actually, you could argue, I guess it's in the eyes of the beholder, because you could argue that the Emperor's staff and his underlings were united. Yep. They were blindly united at letting him do his thing and proudly standing behind him saying, I'm not, we're not going to tell him, or whatever the fable is. But they also potentially lacked courage to actually speak out when they could have, at the sacrifice of their positions. Because the fable quite clearly talks about the positions of leadership that those people have around the Emperor, and for them they would have had to forego that leadership position. But ultimately, leaders sometimes need to step out of that position and let go of the credit and the badge because the greater good is bigger than the position of leadership and the future of the industry or the organisation, whatever it is. So I think it was a really nice reflection for me, and I always love the opportunity when I am asked to speak, because even in an organisation that says the difference between an okay leader and a great leader is the reflection that a great leader can have after they've made mistakes or taken risks. So even just sitting down reflecting about the questions Jill had given me, really like just sitting down and taking the time to connect some random analogy to what I'm going to talk about. But it really made me think about the industries that we look at and the leaders that we work with constantly. It's complex and it's not easy, and that's why people, it's a difficult thing to have those courageous conversations, and that's why they don't happen that often. And it's important to sit in the uncomfortable space. Really, really important to be uncomfortable, because it actually means you're doing something, and if you give yourself reflection time after, it's even better if you can then learn from that. And that's ultimately what people want to see. So I guess just to finish off, a few things. One is you'll never create the solution with the same thinking that created the problem. And that's where looking outside the industry or in your workplace is really important. And that's where programs like this become really important, where you're even mixing with multiple areas of your industry. But even go broader than that, and don't be afraid to ask people in other sectors what they would have done in the same situation. And the other is, in my 10 years at the Rural Leadership Foundation, I've interviewed hundreds of leaders. And two of the questions we ask at the interview to me, are telltale signs. So we ask a range of questions, and there's a written application form, but there are two questions that stand out above all else. And I'm giving away some of our secrets probably. But one question that we ask is, who are the leaders that you look up to? And I'm continually astounded that people struggle to name, and think about it for yourself first, quickly, but people struggle to name female leaders they can look up to, or that they can identify readily other than their mother and their grandmother. And yes, they're great leaders. And also Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders. Because we're so used to, our system is so caught up in a particular ideal about what a leader should look like, that without even knowing about it, we quite often, and I'm making gross assumptions about the people in this room because maybe you're all different, but so often we go to white middle-aged men because that's part of our media cycle and a range of other issues in our community. So I guess I would challenge you to think about who are the leaders that you look up to and why. And then why aren't there female Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, whatever, rural, remote versus city, whatever the diversity piece is that you want to look at. And the other question is around vulnerability. So whilst it's really important to understand and nail what you're best at, you can't do that. You can't spend all your time doing all the good stuff without actually spending some serious time thinking about where am I most vulnerable. And that can work on an individual level. So as an individual, where am I vulnerable so that when shit does hit the fan, I'm not going to show emotion that's actually not appropriate for this space? And how do I manage that emotion when my vulnerabilities are prodded? And the other one then for the organisation is the same thing. So get what you're best at, but then also spend some time thinking and working on where you're vulnerable and developing relationships in that space.